because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have. No one will be cancelled. Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. We have got a packed show for you this morning.
Yes, is the country getting its best MPs with a focus on local issues rather than national ones? Well, we'll be speaking to Michael Crick, who has some very strong views on this, and Jackie Weaver. You must remember that Handforth Parish Council meeting. She's kicked him out, Phil. I know you loved that.
It was terrific. Now, is being hijacked on a plane your worst nightmare? Well, we'll be speaking to somebody that actually happened to. He was held hostage on the Pan Am 73 flight.
And as Britain has an increasing problem with obesity, well, we're asking, how do we fix this? NHS have come forward with fat jabs, extreme diets, calories on menus, but has Japan come up with the best way to sort it out? That's just measuring your waists and fat shaming you.
It doesn't work with me, though, does it? You try every day, it doesn't work with me. But as ever, we want to hear from you this morning, so to get involved in the show, email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start with all of that, here's the latest headlines with the wonderful Tatiana.
Well, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The UK's final evacuation flight out of Sudan will take place later today. The Deputy Prime Minister announced the evacuation will end by 6 o'clock this evening. Oliver Dowden says the decision was made after a decrease in the number of requests for help. Those left in Sudan have been urged to travel to the Wadi Saidna site before 12 p.m. local time in order to be processed for the last journey. So far, British forces have rescued more than 1,500 people. Great Ormond Street Hospital has been granted exemptions to keep nurses working during the upcoming strike action. The Children's Hospital expressed concerns about staffing as Royal College of Nursing staff prepared to walk out. The decision is a U-turn, having previously said there would be no exemptions. RCN members will go on strike from 8 p.m. tomorrow until Monday evening. Health workers belonging to the GMB union yesterday accepted a 5% pay offer from the government. Union officials will now vote to accept the offer at a meeting of the NHS Staff Council next week. And the political editor for the Huffington Post told GB News it doesn't come soon enough.
It's expected that the unions, that council will actually vote to accept the pay deal, in which case all the members, the union members and the NHS employees will get the pay rise that the government is offering. And then that then begs the question, will the strike then continue? I'm not sure it will. So it could actually, we could be looking at the end of the dispute coming quite soon, which, although it won't come soon enough to stop this weekend strike.
Labour is promising to invest in more teachers who are specialists in their subject if they win the next...
Over the course of the...
It comes as a Labour analysis of government figures suggests that there are gaps in expert teaching provisions in state schools across England. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says schools are scrambling to fill roles, meaning there aren't high standards for all children. Well, she told GB News that under Labour, the challenges to teacher recruitment and retention will change.
Over the course of the last decade, the government has presided over recruitment failure and a real challenge across our schools. So what schools are having to do at the moment when they're scrambling to find teachers to cover lessons is to call upon non-specialists to deliver those lessons because of the massive challenges that we're seeing around teacher recruitment and retention. And under Labour, that will change. We'll make sure that all children have access to specialist provision and that we deliver more teachers by ending those tax breaks on private schools.
Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf will lead a day of campaigning in Dundee today to mark a month since becoming the SNP leader. Mr Yousaf has had a tumultuous start to his time in charge with the arrest of former Chief Executive Peter Murrell and former SNP Treasurer Colin Beattie, who were both investigated over party finances and released without charge. However, ahead of his visit today, he assured his supporters that his party membership is on the rise and support for independence remains strong. The Crimean city of Sevastopol has been hit by an alleged drone attack. The city, the largest on the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014, has come under repeated air attacks since Russia sent troops into Ukraine last February. Russian officials have blamed the attacks on Ukraine. Official documents about a £1.3 billion Royal Navy submarine have been reportedly found in the toilets of a Wetherspoons pub. The Sun newspaper has said files about the HMS Anson were left in the Furness Railway in Cumbria. It said the documents appear to show the inner workings of the vessel, and the Royal Navy has said in a statement that no classified information appeared on those papers. A photograph of the King studying at Cambridge University has been released for the very first time. Trinity College shared the picture of the then 18-year-old prince ahead of his coronation next week. Charles studied archaeology and anthropology in his first year and then history for 2 years, graduating in 1970 with a 2-2. And 3 new photographs of the King and the Queen Consort have been released ahead of next week's coronation. The images were taken in the palace's blue drawing room last month. One shows the couple standing side by side in front of a portrait of King George V at his coronation in 1911. And the others, they show Charles and Camilla individually, with the Queen Consort wearing the late Queen's pearl drop earrings. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now let's take a look at today's top stories. For this, we're delighted to say we're joined in the studio by Matthew Lazar, former head of broadcasting for Labour, and TV chef and broadcaster Kevin Woodford. Morning to you both. Kevin, we'll start with you and your story.
OK, well, this is a concerning story for me because I firmly believe in the UK and it should do well as our country. We've had a hard time. Businesses over here have had a very, very difficult time. You look at the economy now, it's struggling really hard, particularly areas such as the tourism area, hospitality, retail in general. So you would think that what this government would do would really encourage as much help as possible to come over and make sure that we get what we need so that it develops even further. But for me, they haven't done that. What they've done is they've removed a very, very important component which enables businesses to do well out of tourists, which is the tax. Right, so if tourist comes over and they buy something, they can get the tax back on it. That's been taken away. There's more than that now. There's 130 companies signed off on a letter which Sirocco 40 sent in to Jeremy Hunt, pleading with him essentially to put this back so that we can get our tourists.
They're calling it a tourist tax fight.
It is a tourist tax fight, and it's one that I think the government need to lose. Honestly, they really do. It's been described by many. It's a massive impact on not just big businesses, but think of the small businesses. There's lots, for example, of little artefact, companies that produce artefact and sort of beautiful little things for the tourists when they come to Britain. They're going to London and they want to buy this. Why would they come here when they can go to Paris, they can go to Rome, they can go to Madrid, they can see the most wonderful sights, and on top of that, they can benefit by getting the tax back on the things that they buy. So the impact concerns me that it will have upon not just the big business, but the small businesses as well. There appears to be, at this stage, no notice being taken of this. And I find that very, very concerning.
I guess, Matthew, what do you think about this? I guess, I don't know, I haven't seen what the government said, but I guess the government's argument would be that, when we've got to, if we want to cut taxes, we'd want to focus it on British people rather than tourists, and if British people are having to take a hit with higher taxes, then there's no reason why tourists shouldn't either. Where would you come out with this?
Yeah, well, absolutely. These are tough times and taxes have been going up for all of us, but I think this is the law of unintended consequences, isn't it? And the knock-on effect is very significant. Think about, the theatre community has been speaking out. People who come to go and buy that handbag at Bicester Shopping Village, will also take in a couple of shows. But it's not just a London thing. People who may come for the shopping then go to the other parts of the country. So you have a knock-on consequences for the tourist industry across the country, whether you're in the Lake District or Cornwall. So I think in the end, it's maybe always self-defeating.
Will it make a difference where people go? Will it stop? Will it stop? I don't know. Will it? I'm not saying it won't. I'm just asking the question.
No, absolutely.
Will it genuinely? People think I'm not going to go to the UK because they've got this tourist tax.
I think shopping is a big component for a lot of visitors, particularly visitors from China and from the Middle East.
Fashion is huge.
Yeah,
it's enormous.
Britain's fashion is huge. So yes, it would. And for me, it makes the case as a Tory. The reason we say low taxation, and when people say low taxation, or it doesn't matter if it's high or low taxation, it won't have an impact, people won't move away. Well, this shows you in a very simple way, overtax, and people will choose another place, another country.
They will. You only have to go to somewhere like, and there are other places available, Bicester Village. The majority of people that are wandering around Bicester Village are not from this country. They're tourists, and they've come over. They've done, and Matt's absolutely right. It's not just London. They go all over the country. They visit the whole of the UK and Scotland and Wales.
So we've won the case finally. Politicians
If only the government listened to us.
Politicians can't do it, but we have done it here. Low taxation is a really good thing for all of the reasons we've just said. Even a Labour person,
sensible taxation.
I'm
not in favour of tax for the sake of it.
Matthew, what's your story?
So, my my story is the front page of the Times, which is Stella Creasy, who is a good friend of mine. I had my first ever job in telly. Stella and I started working on ITV together. But Stella has some very strong views, and, I disagree with her sometimes, and it's perfectly fine to disagree with Stella as it is with any politician. But she has faced a new challenge, which I think is particularly worrying, which has been reported to social services for her kids, basically, that she wasn't looking after her kids properly, by an internet troll, as it's the latest weapon in the armoury of internet trolls. Now, because obviously things to do with kids have to be taken seriously, this then has to be investigated. She was very quickly exonerated completely, totally baseless accusations, but it remains on file, and she had to go through that, which no parent should have to go through. So I think it's just a hugely depressing example of the latest stage in the sort of level of.
So this is somebody who just reported as a social services just because they happened not to agree with her politics.
Yeah, they thought she was anti-men. And that was the chart, and therefore that she was bringing up her children in the wrong way, and there's no basis to it. But the particular thing is that
how seriously did the police take it?
They took it. So the police took it very seriously. Stella's an MP in North London. The guy was from Leicestershire. He reported it to her local council, who had to investigated it. Very quickly cleared her. But then when it went back to the police in Leicestershire, and Stella said, "Well, can you do something about this guy?" They said, "No, he's got an absolutely legitimate concern because he disagrees with you." I mean, I'm not sure that disagreeing with somebody's views is a basis for child protection.
Well,
I mean, it's just
we
insane.
certainly don't. I mean, absolutely not.
Completely outrageous, isn't it? Unbelievable.
I was looking at the story following on, really, from yesterday, and that was Richard Sharp having to resign as chairman of the BBC. The calls now, should it be a female chairperson, whatever you want to say, of the BBC. So I thought I'd put out a little tweet on GB News there. Well, what do you think? Well, actually, thousands and thousands of people have voted on it, and they've actually said 60-40. No, we don't think it should just be a woman. No, all the comments, on the hundreds of comments afterwards, saying we want the best person for the job.
Exactly.
Not just if it's a woman. I mean, you've got some great names there. You've got Nicky Morgan there, Helena Morrissey there, also Tina Stowell there. All baronesses have gone forward. But really, no, we don't want a woman for a woman's sake. And that's pretty much what all the comments are coming through.
And shouldn't that apply to everything? It should be the best person for the job. Exactly. It shouldn't be gender, it shouldn't be race. It should be whoever's the most suitable person.
But at the moment, they're sort of brought in an interim, who's Muriel Gray, who is a woman. I don't have a problem with whether it's a woman, but you're right, it's got to be the best person. But actually, when people have been questioning the impartiality over Richard Sharp, and then you've brought in somebody now who mocked Brexit, was anti-Boris, doesn't agree with Conservative policies. What on earth is going on? Which has led then the Express to say, look, guys, it's like one rule for one rule for another. Nobody can seem to shut Gary Lineker up, and look who you've brought in. What are we doing? So, anybody else got concerns on that? I do. I really do think it was another scalp, another Conservative scalp, as Utley says in the Mail today. You've got rid of somebody else, and it's going to be one after another now, going for all the Tories in various industries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who wants the BBC to thrive and succeed, and who worked there for too many years for me to try and remember, I think it needs to be somebody who's got broadcasting experience. I think we've had enough of the great and the good, of random worthies, from left or right. It needs to be somebody who knows the business and knows the industry and can lead the BBC through what are going to be very, very challenging times as the way audiences consume.
I mean, that's axiomatic. I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that, if you're going to be leading an organisation, a massive organisation like the BBC, then surely the background of that individual should be relative to the actual
big question mark here. I know what you're going to say, Phil.
Well,
wait. Telepathic. That's what we're married. We know what each other's going to say.
It's all these nights. It's these nights together.
The person I would love to see become the chairman, I don't think he's interested.
I'm going to give you the name. Archie Norman. So you.
So Archie Norman who was my boss at Asda, and is a genius, and is the person I look up to probably most in the world, and did wonders at Asda, and he's doing wonders at M&S at the moment. But he also did wonders at ITV when he was chairman of ITV.
Yes, absolutely.
But he didn't have experience before, so it counts experience now. But he didn't.
But because he was a Conservative MP, and for many people that is sort of a red rag to a bull.
We've had Labour people. We had Gavin Davis do it
Greg
before.
Dyke.
Michael
and Greg
Lyons.
Dyke. Yeah, absolutely. And Michael Lyons. So I'm less, you know, as a Labour person who worked at the BBC and was scrupulously impartial throughout my time there, I'm very happy with somebody like Archie Norman, who's got a mixture of broadcasting and business experience. What we don't want is another random banker.
What about Robbie Gibb?
Male or female?
What about Robbie Gibb's got lots of broadcasting experience.
Robbie Gibb taught me how to direct. I was his researcher and he was producer on the record back in the day.
But
so I've got to say, I've got to say good words about Robbie.
I
Don't kill me
also
otherwise.
hear George Osborne.
Sir Robbie's, isn't it? Yes.
George Osborne's name's in the front.
I'd rather have Archie Norman. Do you know who I'd really like, though? Do you know who I'd really like? Who we might come to later is Floella Benjamin.
OK.
Who's a flavour of the month because of the coronation, but she was, you know...
But Kevin, do you think it is one rule for one and one rule for the other? The attacks against Richard Sharp...
Without question.
Without real foundation.
Without question. Esther, without question. And I want to just pick up on Phil's point. It's not often you and I agree, Phil. Right, it is. we like to disagree, don't we? Whether it's coffee, tea or whatever, we like to disagree and whatever. But I agree with you.
Not on women, we agree on that one.
We agree on merit.
We do.
We agree on merit.
We do. But Phil's right. And I think the balance there is that the individual... I think if you go all broadcasting experience as a chairman, that's wrong. If you go non-broadcasting experience, that's wrong. You put the two things together and you've got somebody that's really well balanced to be able to sort of lead the organisation forward.
Can I ask you a quick question about Archie, though? Is it true that the standing up meetings that you used to... So we're not going to introduce that here, Phil? We're not going to have to be standing up next week?
Mind you, these chairs are so bad, I feel I should stand up.
It would be better, wouldn't it, actually?
To be honest, Asda, there was only one meeting room which was a stand-up room. All the others, there was just one. But the idea being... it was quite a good idea. The idea being if you have a meeting room where everyone has to stand up, you wouldn't spend ages just chatting about Coronation Street, whatever. You get straight on with it and straight down to business.
Can I just do this quick story here? It's in The Guardian. First women-only residential tower block gets planning permission approved in the West of London. So this is the first one, women-only 102 flats rented by single women. And I like this bit, designed specifically for women. I'm thinking, what was this designed specifically? So they've got here slightly lower kitchen work surfaces. And they've also got a careful attention to ventilation to ensure comfort for menopausal women. So I'm laughing at the design.
Is that a window?
However, there's huge caveats here. So if you've got a son, well, he's allowed there if it's an adult son. And what if you get a partner while you're in it, where he can come and stay as well? And if you're transgendering, well, you can be there as well. So all of a sudden, it is not a block for women. But what they talked about, where they felt safety, and it was all about safety, then people who are taking legal objections says, but surely the high concentration of women just in one place will put women at risk. So is this a nonsense?
I think it's a bit. I think it's stuff. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, of whom I'm not a fan, came up with the idea of reintroducing women-only railway carriages. Do you remember he floated that? And the reaction that he got for that, which was mostly from women, which was pretty firm, I think is the reaction that I would give to this.
Kevin, well, I mean, I have to say, sort of, Labour Party has difficult sometimes even knowing what a woman is. We had prison places. Well, women, is it safe spaces? But it's OK. We can now...
Not as much trouble as the SNP has.
Yeah, exactly. But we can now have a block of flats for women only. I just thought it was strange.
Now, just finally...
I think it's sexist.
Page 3 of the Mirror. What is your favourite TV theme tune?
Are you asking me?
Do you have a particular favourite, Kevin?
I have, actually. I have. It's Coronation Street. I
really?
Just love that piece of music.
Doesn't even make the top 20. Matthew, have you got a...
Poirot. Yeah, which the guy who composed it died a couple of weeks ago, and it reminded me just of how brilliant the people are who do TV music.
I'm a big Poirot fan. Actually, I was watching Father Brown last night. That's got a cracking theme tune as well. But look,
I like Sex in the City.
Top 20 here.
Is that the music or is that a personal comment?
live on TV.
It's not as funny as that.
Esther likes Sex in the City. Don't know what to say to that. Put me off my stroke there. But anyway, the top 20 here, I think a lot of it says about the age of the people they were asked, because at number 17 we've got Rawhide.
I remember. I can actually remember Rawhide.
Yeah, before most people's time. Number 11 is Dallas. Number 5, this is a good one, the A-Team. But anyway, the top one is Friends.
Is it?
Ben's is the top theme tune. Are you with that, Matthew?
Do you know, very quickly...
we do a better theme tune in Britain.
One of my restaurants, and I don't like music in restaurants, and I had a great Sicilian restaurant manager who ignored me completely. And I remember coming back for dinner one evening and he wasn't expecting me, and I sat down for dinner to the music of EastEnders as I was about to eat my starter. Dum, 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 dum. Horrible. So no, no, definitely not for restaurants.
Anyway, there you go.
Theme tunes, what do you think? Now, look, let us know your favourite theme tunes. Kevin, you're staying with us. Matt, you're staying with us. We'll see you in the next hour. But coming up, we'll be speaking to Michael Crick and Jackie Weaver. She's kicked him out. On how to pick the best MP.
And don't forget to listen to us on GB News Radio if you're just popping out, and that way you won't miss a thing. Stay with us.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway... Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. It's 10:24.
Lots of views coming in about all sorts of different things. On the tourist tax, Ron says, I've just listened to you on your tourist tax and I find that's the trouble in this country. The people who run our country think about everyone else except British people. Tourist tax not for the British, homeless on the streets, non-British in hotels. I'm not going to vote in the coming elections because nothing is for the British except paying taxes. That's what Ron has to say.
Now, I'm going to speak about what Mel says here, because she said, Esther and Phil, when will someone debunk Labour funding plans? This morning, Bridget Phillinson said teacher recruitment will be funded by ending the charity status of private schools so they can impose VAT. That would only mean tens of thousands of people would no longer be able to afford school fees, and that would mean a flood into the state schools, which would take up all of the VAT raised.
That was on the news earlier about that, so thank you for those views. Keep them coming in.
And lots here as well, but we'll get back to them a bit later about the BBC and Richard Sharp. And we'll come back to those.
Back to it in a bit.
Now, former Conservative Party leader William Hague has recently written an article for The Times where he questions the current direction of our politics.
Hague believes too many local councillors are becoming MPs and there is too much focus in Parliament on local issues rather than on broader national and international issues.
Well, joining us now to discuss the pros and cons of localism is journalist Michael Crick and the Chief Officer at the Cheshire Association of Local Councils, Jackie Weaver. Welcome to you both. Michael Crick, you've got quite a lot to say on localism and are we getting the best MPs for our country now? Where do we begin?
Well, my view is I agree fully with William Hague on this. The local parties, particularly in the Labour Party, who've chosen now more than 120 candidates for the next election in winnable seats, are choosing overwhelmingly local candidates, which sounds great. It will sound great to the voters. The trouble is that when parties are choosing MPs, they're not just choosing a member of Parliament. They should be choosing potential ministers, cabinet ministers. And if you restrict choice for each little local party to people with local connections, you're greatly reducing the number of people they might choose from. And there are a lot of politicians who don't really have a particular locality. They've moved around a lot. They've worked abroad, perhaps. And therefore, it would be very difficult for them to get into Parliament. And I say to people, look, tell me who your political heroes are. Margaret Thatcher, perhaps, Tony Benn, perhaps, Winston Churchill. None of them were local MPs. They had constituencies, but they weren't local to the areas. They weren't well known in those areas. They didn't have anything to do with those areas before they were MPs. Or loads of places in Churchill's case, or Bristol or Chesterfield in Benn's case. But they were good MPs, and they were certainly good politicians, good statesmen, good parliamentarians, good ministers. And it's about future governments that we should be thinking, not about who is good at dealing with constituency problems, which are only a small part of being an MP, as you both know. You've got other roles too, scrutinising legislation, holding the executive to account, and being part of that pool of people from whom ministers are chosen. Esther,
looks like Jackie's got a furrowed brow there.
You're still waiting.
Michael, looks like Jackie's got a furrowed brow. How important, Jackie, is local issues to local people? What's happening to them day in, day out as they leave their front door?
Good morning, Esther. I mean, you know what I'm going to say about this. I mean, I think that the local aspect is hugely important. And I think that Hague goes on further because actually he also goes on to say that model works best when there is further delegation to our principal authorities, to local government. And that's the problem. I mean, we don't have delegation to local people. So the only way we feel that we can influence is by electing local MPs. And I absolutely refute the idea that you can't have intelligent people who can contribute to the national debate, who contribute to national politics, but also come from the locality. I mean,
Jackie,
the number of people who feel that their MP is the last resort, is hugely important to them, is all about localism. It is not about their influence on national policy.
Jackie, what about Michael's point that, you know, Margaret Thatcher was from Grantham but was the MP for Finchley and lots of people admire her. Winston Churchill was the MP for various places, Manchester, Dundee, Epping. I mean, he was all over the show, to be perfectly honest, and most people would look back on him and think that he was one of the finest MPs we've had. So doesn't that really sort of disprove the theory that what we want is local MPs? Doesn't that show that what people want are good MPs?
Well, yeah, what people want is good MPs, but what I'm arguing is that doesn't mean that they can't also be local MPs. And you've only mentioned 3 people there. Out of how many MPs have we had since Margaret Thatcher?
Oh, we were just giving you the best names that people would know. We've got limited time because otherwise we were going through hundreds and hundreds. But, Michael, hasn't it gone more local?
I'm not sure you would be, Esther.
Hasn't it gone more local, Michael? Aren't you sort of wrong there? Don't people in a constituency want somebody that they can take their problems to now?
Well, they do want somebody they can take their problems to, and nobody is arguing, not William Hague, not me, nor anybody else as far as I'm aware, that local people should be banned from being MPs. And, you know, there are many local people who would be fine MPs, very good MPs and very good ministers. I'm just saying the trend is all in the wrong direction. And the danger is it's going to exclude people. I mean, I had Douglas Hurd as my MP for many years in Oxfordshire. And he was a brilliant constituency MP. Even while he was Foreign Secretary, he would come along to the village hall, spend for several hours dealing with the local problems in our village, and then make sure they were dealt with. And that informed his work as Foreign Secretary and Home Secretary and so on. But what I'm saying is that we've got to think of a bit of the bigger picture here. We've got to think of who are going to be good cabinet ministers or good ministers, who will be good, who knows about the big stuff, you know, the economy, foreign affairs, defence. And the trend is now that everybody's got to be local. Somebody who's just from just down the road outside the constituency is denounced as being not from round here. I mean, it's almost akin to racism at times. The Conservative candidate, I remember in North Shropshire in the by-election about 18 months ago, he was denounced as a barrister from Birmingham. You know, as if there was something wrong with being a barrister, and as if there was something wrong with being from Birmingham.
You know how politicians campaign to win these things.
Narrow-minded, and it's intolerant.
But Michael,
I just do not accept that at all. I mean, I think the one thing that's missing from the discussion is that it's not just about representing individual constituents and kind of raising their issues. It's about people who have a real understanding of what it's like to actually live north of Watford. And when you listen to so many of our politicians speaking, it is clear that they are so out of touch with the reality of people who live in rural areas, who live in areas that just can't hop on a bus and use public transport, that don't have access to services, etc. And their experience is of urban areas and also more southerly. And I think it's a huge mistake if we don't make sure that we elect somebody who totally understands our area and our needs. And that doesn't preclude them from being good politicians.
Jackie Weaver, thank you very much indeed for that. It's a fascinating debate. Michael, while we've got you here, obviously...
Are you going to say we've kicked her out?
Yeah, we have.
We've kicked Jackie out.
We've kicked her out. Michael, while we've still got you, obviously Richard Sharp resigned as chairman of the BBC yesterday. I just wondered, you know, how did you rate his as a former BBC man? How did you rate his tenure as chairman of the BBC, and where do you think the BBC and the government should go now with regards to recruiting a successor?
Well, the trouble was he was a complete lame duck and an embarrassment to the BBC because of this row and because of he hadn't declared the interest. But it's not really a BBC story. It's a story about cronyism in the Johnson government and the way in which that government for a while was beset by the fact that Johnson was in a complete tiz about his personal financial problems. It's quite absurd that he should have been, given that 800,000 for Boris Johnson now is, you know, pocket money for you or me. But the next time, it's got to be, there's got to be an independent process by the chairman of the BBC is chosen. It shouldn't be a political crony. And I think this should apply when and if Labour come back to power as well. The chairmanship of the BBC is too important to be given by somebody who's got, you know, who's been rewarded for a political favour, or who is a former minister of the governing party.
Just quickly, Michael, you say it's about cronyism of Boris Johnson, but of course, you know, Gavin Davies was the chairman of the BBC. He was a new Labour crony. Michael Lyons was a new Labour stooge when he was made chairman.
Greg Dyke.
I mean, it's not just this isn't just a Boris Johnson cronyism story, is it? And it's, you know, this is about this happens with every government. So how should it be chosen? How should the chairman of the BBC be chosen if it's not appointed by the government?
I agree those people shouldn't have been appointed under Labour either. But the point about Sharp was that, you know, the whole, it wasn't a loan actually, it was a credit facility, but it helped Johnson financially, and it looked dreadful, and it was a huge embarrassment to the BBC. There needs to be some kind of independent process, possibly run by the regulator Ofcom, although Ofcom are a pretty pathetic organisation these days. That some independent process has to be put forward. And if I were Labour,
have you got a name?
I would be saying right now, sorry?
Have you got a name of who you'd like to see as the next chairman? Give us a name.
No, not really. No, I mean, there'll be plenty of people who do the job really well.
It's always interesting that nobody does have a name. Maybe there aren't that many people who would be great.
Maybe it should be Michael Crick.
I'll do it if no one else will.
Maybe it should be Michael. Maybe it should be Michael Crick. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate it.
Now, just quickly, because I know we've got to get to the break. This issue, though, and we pointed out, every government has chosen somebody of their leaning. It's a government appointment. They've all done that. We've seen that. But what's coming out in the papers now, written in the Mail today, is this. Was it all about getting another Tory scalp? They'd seen Dominic Raab off. They now got rid of Richard Sharp. Is it one rule for one rule for somebody else? What is this all about? What is bubbling up? Maybe our viewers have gone...
Well, we've had some... our viewers have been giving some ideas. Mel says Dan Wootton or Nigel Farage should be chairman. Tim says Neil Oliver. And Ron says Nadine Dorries. So there you go. We've got some ideas coming through already.
Well, coming up, we'll be speaking with the survivor of a terrorist attack when his plane was hijacked, and we're going to be talking about his experience and what he learned from the terrorist when he got to meet him last year. And don't forget, get in touch with us as well. Give us your emails, give us your views. Emails at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Stay with us.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. It is 10:39.
Now, I've just had a quick text here from Michael Crick, because we had to end that interview quickly. He says, PMs don't always support a BBC chair of the party. In 1967, Harold Wilson appointed Charles Hill, former Tory health minister. Signed off, M. Thank you very much indeed for that. He got the last word in.
He did.
Well, it's nearly been 40 years since the horrific hostage crisis which saw 20 people killed on Pan Am Flight 773.
But ahead of a new documentary, one survivor has been coming to terms with the experience, which saw him face death and yet survive. Here to tell us his incredible story is Mike Thexton. Mike, it must be everybody's worst nightmare to get on a plane and find that it's been hijacked by terrorists. Tell us what happened and how close you came to suffering the ultimate price.
I was coming back from a mountaineering expedition in northern Pakistan, and I was travelling alone. I'd rearranged my flight, trying to get home as quickly as possible. Boarded this Pan Am jumbo jet in Karachi airport early in the morning of Friday, the 5th of September, 1986. And while I was still standing by my seat, unpacking a book from my hand luggage, a couple of terrorists appeared in the two doorways, struggling with the flight attendant, telling another flight attendant to close the door, and they took over the plane. And right at the beginning, the pilots escaped. Now, they got a certain amount of criticism for that at the time, but even on the plane, when I realised that must have been what happened, I was very grateful we weren't going to be flying anywhere. So we were stuck on the ground. After a while, they shot somebody and threw them out of the plane to emphasise that they meant business. And then they asked one of the flight attendants to collect in passports. They seemed to be looking for Americans. And although it wasn't really her problem, with incredible bravery and ingenuity, she decided not to put white Americans in the bag. She just got rid of them, hid them. And when she went back, they sorted out all the American passports. She showed them that these people were all had Indian and Pakistani faces and names, and convinced him that there weren't any Western Americans on the plane. Which promoted the British as the next most unpopular people, and they picked mine. So they called me to the front of the plane, and I was their chief bargaining counter for about 12 hours.
And do you want to tell us what actually they did to you? Because this must have been the most horrendous moment of your life. Well, so far, yes. I hope that I won't have many more like that. They called me forward, and I was sure that they were going to shoot me. I couldn't think of any other reason that they would have picked me out. I couldn't quite understand why they were picking on the British. I was sure that on a Pan Am plane, surely there were some Americans. But I got to the front of the plane, and the leader had my passport in his hand. He asked me who I was and where I was from, and if I had a gun, which I actually laughed at because I was probably close to hysterics. I said, no, you've got all the guns around here. And then he got me to kneel in the doorway of the plane. There were 4 flight attendants there who had seen him shoot the man half an hour before, so they really knew what was happening, whereas I only sort of imagined it. And what had they told the negotiators?
Yeah.
What had they told the negotiators they were going to do if their demands weren't met?
Yes, he told them, if anyone comes near the plane, if any US troops come near the plane, we will kill one body immediately. He had a Kalashnikov rifle. He clearly was going to use it. And I was convinced that he would, that at that moment, the negotiator on the ground got him.
Things seemed to get worse and worse, didn't they? Because you're on the plane there for 15 hours, the energy for the planes draining away, the lights go dim, the lights then go out, and the terrorists panic. What happens then?
They just put me back with the others as the lights started to go down. They put me back into the main cabin, and I suddenly thought, I stand a chance here because I'm just one of the crowd now, rather than front of the queue. And you could tell though that something was about to happen. And in the darkness, one of them threw a hand grenade. That's what I remember first, the bang of a hand grenade. And then automatic gunfire from the front of the plane, a few rows in front of me. And then from the back of the plane, sounding very distant, because it's a big plane. And then from the front of the plane, and then from the back of the plane, random mayhem. And I looked up. My recollection is that they ran out of ammunition. They just stopped. And in the relative silence afterwards and in the darkness, I looked up. I could see the doors were open, and I jumped out onto the wing and slid off the back of the wing and dropped onto the ground and picked myself up and ran away. And I can still actually picture the silhouette of the plane against the night sky. And I was just thinking, I'm dreaming. I can't possibly have got out of this. I will wake up in a minute and I'll be back on that plane.
Mike, extraordinarily, you've actually spoken to one of your hostage takers. How did that come about? Why did you do that? And what did he say to you?
So a couple of years ago, I was contacted about a new documentary, this film, Hijacked, that is on Sky Documentaries today. And the director, after interviewing lots of people who are involved, he came to see me and said that he'd been in touch with the terrorist in his jail in America, where he is serving a 160-year sentence. And although he didn't really want to give the man a voice, he said he has agreed to talk to me. And if I had any questions for him, then they could arrange a phone call. And I thought about it quite hard. I didn't really want to sort of sound as if I was being friendly with this man, but obviously, if I was going to answer questions, I would have to ask them, politely, or else he would probably just hang up. So I had the questions. The phone call happened, and I asked him the questions, and he gave me very surprising answers, I have to say. The first question I asked was, why did you put me back with the others? If you were about to open fire, why did you not just shoot me there at the front of the plane? And that was what I was expecting all day. And he said it was because I had told him right at the beginning, 12 hours earlier, please don't hurt me. My brother died in the mountains of altitude sickness, and my parents, will have no one else. And he said, that touched my heart. And I thought, step aside. That's why he said he had put me back with the others. And in all the years, it had never occurred to me that he was even listening at the beginning of the hijack when he said that.
And Mike, this is when, they had you at one point kneeling at the front of the plane with a gun to your head. This is, at that moment, this is when he could have taken your life.
He asked me when I came forward, and he had my passport in his hand, and was saying, kneel here by the front door. That's when I told him about my brother. And he just sort of waved a hand as if to say, I'm too busy, I'm doing what I'm doing. I never thought he was even listening.
Why is the documentary happening now, all these years later, Mike? How's that come about?
That is a very good question, and honestly, I don't know. They have made a cracking film. I mean, it's a hard watch. It's a very, very sad story, and there are a lot of people that they interview, and you can see the awful things that they've suffered. But it is a very good story. I mean, the incredible heroism of the flight attendant who collected in the passports and protected the Americans and others. And I think there are lessons for today, but it is surprising that after all this time they made that film.
Well, Mike Thexton, thank you so much for taking the time to share that horrific story with us. We appreciate your time, and it really is an amazing story.
And I will say that was my worst nightmare, is a plane being hijacked. I remember growing up, there seemed to be a spate of them in the sort of 70s and 80s, and I thought, like that, with Mike there, it was a lottery. They just pulled a name out, which passport, who, dragged you up front. The terrorists were saying, we're going to kill a person every 20 minutes if you don't listen to what we have to say or don't agree to our demands. Horrendous. What fantastic person. What a...
Yeah, absolutely.
What a story.
And the heroism of the flight attendants. I mean, that shouldn't be underplayed either.
Now, are we losing the obesity battle in the UK? Some of us might say yes. Anyway, the NHS is introducing fat jabs. People are demanding taxes on fat and sugar. And we put calories now on menus, all in a bid to make us all get thinner.
But is the solution something simpler? The Japanese are introducing weight measuring at work, which is, in effect, fat shaming, which is what Esther does to me every single day, and without much success, it has to be said. But it seems to be working a lot better in Japan.
Don't fall for it. He's always playing for sympathy. Don't fall for it.
It's true.
I don't say that. I say a bit of exercise wouldn't do anybody any harm. I don't talk about the weight.
Every day.
I just say a little bit of exercise wouldn't do anybody any harm. Anyway, joining us now... Not a marriage counsellor, but joining us now to discuss his matters is Steve Miller, a former presenter of Fat Families. So, Steve, we've done all of these things. The government's getting involved, telling people what they should do, what they can, what they can't eat. We've got calories on menus, but it seems Japan have got the solution. Just measure people. Just measure people's waists and let everybody know. Fat shaming, is this the way to go?
Well, in Japan, this is a law that came in 2008, and it's for people, men and women over the age of 40, and they have this annual measurement of their waist. And it does seem to be working extremely well. I mean, you look at the figures now, and in the UK, we have obesity that is at 28%, around 28%. In Japan, it's around 4%. So they're obviously doing something really well. Another country that does this, not exactly the same measures, but has this kind of, no tolerance towards being too fat because of the health consequences is also South Korea. I mean, they will tell you if you're too fat. I think the difference here in the UK, of course, is that, as I've said many times, we now glorify it. We kind of, if ever we talk about the health issues around being too fat, including the mental health issues around being too fat, we are automatically called a fat shamer. And I think this sort of thing should be introduced. And yes, it's arguably a kind of nanny state intervention. But I tell you what, we need a strong nanny in this country to deal with obesity, because all we seem to be doing is getting fatter and fatter and fatter. We're becoming the biggest bloaters in Europe.
Steve, I mean, the food when I went to South Korea, the food was so terrible. Even I'd be thin if I lived in South Korea, to be perfectly honest. It was nothing to do with fat shame. It was that the food was foul. But your programme, Fat Families, was, in effect, if you don't mind me saying, it was an exercise in fat shaming. I mean, did you find that it did actually work or not?
Why was it? No. Why was it an exercise in fat shaming? It told people that they were too fat. Of course it did. And I think we need to be telling more people that they're too fat.
Steve,
if they are too fat. Because
Steve, I'm with you.
Of the health consequences. But also, yes, let me explain. There was the biggest injection of humour in that programme.
Steve, I'm with you. Steve, stop just a second. I'm with you. It's just Phil never wants to be told he's overweight, so carry on. Aim your comments at Phil.
Hey, and do you know what, Phil? Seriously, the amount of emails and tweets and all that sort of positive stuff I get from people now, including young people who say, we've lost our sense of humour. Fat Families was great because it made people laugh. We talked about melting that lard. The results were incredible. You were funny. And there is great scientific research that backs this up, that humour motivates. So what I say to people is, yes, if you're too fat, remember this, if you're fat, you're too gorgeous to be fat. Start telling yourself that. And there is nothing wrong with saying to someone, I'm worried that you're going to become a massive fatty and be on death row. Let's melt that lard and sort it out.
Steve, I'm with you. Humour is the way sometimes to tackle a conversation people might not want to have. And lots of people now might not have that conversation, might want to admit they're a little bit chubby or portly or whatever we say. So I think you are on the money, and Japan thinks you're on the money. Just Phil doesn't think you're on the money.
Listen, in Japan, it is the norm, and employers also get involved, to just be honest with people and say to them, yeah, you are too fat. And I always say, you know, if you are a butterball right now, you can melt yourself. It is possible.
Any other sort of... If somebody's now feeling motivated by you...
I am here, by the way.
Yeah, say Phil is now feeling motivated by you. He's admitted this. He's heard what you've had to say. It's humour. How does he go about, then? First thing, what should he do? What should he do? Is there things he should give up? Drinks? Is Coca-Cola? Is this, that, the other? Is there things you go about? Full English breakfasts?
Never, ever give up. Never give up anything. What you do is you live 80%, 80-20. You eat well 80% of the time. You eat a bit of what you fancy for 20% of the time. You watch your portions, but you do this in a creative way. For example, start eating your meals looking at that item of clothing you want to get into. Start eating your meals with the fat photo that you dread, which encourages you to eat less, but at the same time, the photo of you when you were an ideal weight to motivate you towards that end result, and motivating you, therefore, to eat less. Weight loss is, on a serious note, weight loss is all about motivation. It is not about a diet. People know what to eat to be slimmer. We have to get our mind over the platter. That is really, really important.
Steve
and
Miller.
Yes, we have to keep a sense of humour.
Steve Miller, thank you very much indeed. Now,
Terrific.
I'm not saying I got
Absolutely
Steve on
terrific.
specifically for you, Phil, but it's just this thought here. Humour, mind over platter, all of these things. Fantastic. We're going to get him back on. We're going to have him on a weekly basis here. But anyway, we've got lots more coming up in the next hour. We'll be joined by our punchy panel to discuss the news stories of the week. Everybody's talking about that. Matthew, Loz and Kevin Woodford.
And for many people around the country, it's local elections next week. You'll be having to take your ID with you. We'll be discussing that with Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle. And in the meantime, I'm going to get on the scales.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. Phil's had his cup of coffee this morning, but he's not been dunking his biscuits after that interview with Steve Miller.
It won't be Esther and Phil, it'll be thin and fatty, won't it? That'll be the next, that'll be how we'll be billed next. Anyway, we'll be talking to Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle about whether voter ID is a good idea or an infringement on democratic rights ahead of the local elections on Thursday.
And with the coronation of King Charles just 1 week away, we'll be speaking to royal commentator Judita De Silva for the latest from the royal household.
And we'll be looking at the big stories of the week with former head of broadcasting for Labour, Matthew Lazar, and TV chef and broadcaster Kevin Woodford.
And as ever this morning, we want to hear from you, so get involved in the show. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start, is the latest headlines with Tatiana.
Esther, thank you very much and good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The UK's final evacuation flights out of Sudan will take place later today. The Deputy Prime Minister announced the evacuation will end by 6 o'clock this evening. Oliver Dowden says the decision was made after a decrease in the number of requests for help. Those left in Sudan have been urged to travel to the Wadi Saidna site before 12 p.m. local time in order to be processed for the last journey. So far, British forces have rescued more than 1,500 people. Great Ormond Street Hospital has been granted exemptions to keep nurses working during the upcoming strike action. The Children's Hospital expressed concerns about staffing as Royal College of Nursing staff prepared to walk out. The decision is a U-turn, having previously said there would be no exemptions. RCN members will go on strike from 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Until Monday evening. Health workers belonging to the GMB union yesterday accepted a 5% pay offer from the government. Union officials will now vote to accept the offer at a meeting of the NHS Staff Council next week. The political editor for the Huffington Post told GB News it doesn't come soon enough.
It's expected that the unions, that council will actually vote to accept the pay deal, in which case all the members, the union members and the NHS employees will get the pay rise that the government is offering. And then that then begs the question, will the strike then continue? I'm not sure it will. So it could actually, we could be looking at the end of the dispute coming quite soon, which, although it won't come soon enough to stop this weekend strike action.
Labour's promising to invest in more teachers who are specialists in their subject if they win the next general election. It comes as a Labour analysis of government figures suggests that there are gaps in expert teaching provisions in state schools across England. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says schools are scrambling to fill roles, meaning there aren't high standards for all children. Well, she told GB News that under Labour, the challenges to teacher recruitment and retention will change.
Over the course of the last decade, the government has presided over recruitment failure and a real challenge across our schools. So what schools are having to do at the moment when they're scrambling to find teachers to cover lessons is to call upon non-specialists to deliver those lessons because of the massive challenges that we're seeing around teacher recruitment and retention. And under Labour, that will change. We'll make sure that all children have access to specialist provision and that we deliver more teachers by ending those tax breaks on private schools.
Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf will lead a day of campaigning in Dundee today to mark a month since becoming the SNP leader. Mr Yousaf has had a tumultuous start to his time in charge with the arrest of former Chief Executive Peter Murrell and former SNP Treasurer Colin Beattie, who were both investigated over party finances and released without charge. However, ahead of his visit today, he assured his supporters that his party membership is on the rise and support for independence remains strong. The Crimean city of Sevastopol has been hit by an alleged drone attack. The city, the largest on the Crimean peninsula, which Russia annexed from the Ukraine in 2014, has come under repeated air attacks since Russia sent troops into Ukraine last February. Russian officials have blamed the attacks on Ukraine. Now, official documents about a £1.3 billion Royal Navy submarine have been reportedly found in the toilets of a Wetherspoons pub. The Sun newspaper has said files about the HMS Anson were left in the Furness Railway in Cumbria. It said the documents appeared to show the inner workings of the vessel. The Royal Navy has said in a statement that no classified information appeared in those papers. A photograph of the King studying at Cambridge University has been released for the very first time. Trinity College shared the picture of the then 18-year-old Prince ahead of his coronation next week. Charles studied archaeology and anthropology in his first year and then history for 2 years, graduating in 1970. And 3 new photographs of the King and Queen consort have been released ahead of next week's coronation. The images were taken in the palace's blue drawing room last month. One shows the couple standing side by side in front of a portrait of King George V at his coronation in 1911. Another shows Charles and Camilla individually, with the Queen consort wearing the late Queen's pearl drop earrings. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it is back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana, and I'm delighted to say that we're rejoined in the studio by Matthew Lazar, former head of broadcasting for Labour, and TV chef and broadcaster Kevin Woodford. And, oh my goodness, so many of our viewers have got in touch with their favourite theme tunes for TV shows. Hill Street Blues, Z-Cars, the Dukes of Hazzard.
Who likes Z-Cars?
The new series Yellowstone, Persuaders, Red Dwarf, Beverly Hillbillies. But I have to say, if I had to take a poll from all of the ones coming in, Cheers. Well, lots of people are saying Cheers. No. Not there from Matthew. Oh, yes, Cheers, very good.
Marina's got one I like. She said the theme tune from The Third Man. That brilliant. That
it takes us into film, but that is the greatest. That's the greatest movie theme tune.
I've got Dynasty.
May says, I've always liked the Match of the Day theme tune. The only problem with that, May, is that Gary Lineker comes on shortly afterwards, so that's...
He's a fine presenter.
Ruins it for you.
Julie says it's got to be Maigret by the great super talented Ron Grainer. Now, Julie, Ron Grainer, I'm with you this. Ron Grainer was probably the greatest writer of theme tunes.
Really?
He did The Prisoner. Remember The Prisoner? That is possibly one of the greatest.
Why do you know these things?
Mine of useless information.
He
also, I think he also did Steptoe and Son.
Great.
And Tales of the Unexpected.
Tales of the Unexpected.
Yeah. Ron Grainer did all of those.
Tales of the Unexpected, isn't that?
I can never sleep after hearing that.
Lots of people getting in touch. Champion the Wonder Horse, everything. Everyone's got seems to have an opinion on
favourite.
But
back to serious business.
Yes,
Mind you, that was serious business.
Wow,
everybody liked that one. Matthew, should we go to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm not sure how serious it is, but I think it is very important. So, after complaints, Amazon has given in and is making changes because Alexa is too posh. For those who don't know, Alexa's the sort of box that you talk to get to, give you a timer or change your radio channel or whatever linked to your Amazon account. And apparently, it can't cope with regional accents now. With all 4 of us are from the north here today. So, what they're going to do, or what they're doing now, is that
She couldn't understand.
She couldn't understand northern accents and couldn't understand specifically northern expressions. So they are adding a whole series,
she's got a point there,
of northern to make it, so Alexa is now going to be more northern friendly.
So it's not the voice of Alexa.
No, that's still going to be that kind of.
That's still going to be this,
yes,
and it's like the sat nav in car kind of thing, sort of a posh kind of. They're not changing that. They're not going to.
It's just what she couldn't tune her ear. Alexa couldn't tune her ear.
So she couldn't understand it. Yes, when you were saying
day.
Can I just say that when I worked for Asda and I was responsible for the services for disabled customers, we used to have, for these disabled parking spaces, if you drove into a disabled parking space, you went over a sensor and it would shout out to you, you've parked in a disabled parking bay. If you don't need to park here, please park elsewhere. And people thought, you know, blooming heck, somebody's watching me, and they'd move out if they didn't need it. It was quite effective.
That's good.
Anyway, I decided in my wisdom, this is one of the many bad decisions I made at Asda, that I would change, we'd have a celebrity. We'd do a celebrity doing the voiceover for this thing. And obviously, being at Asda, it was all about low prices. We couldn't afford to pay a celebrity. So we did a talent competition in Blackpool with Jim Bowen hosting it to see who could do the best impersonation. And we picked somebody who was brilliant, who did a brilliant impersonation of Fred Elliott from Coronation Street.
Oh, yeah.
And so we then recorded this fella going, you can't park here. I say, you can't park here, you know, like Fred Elliott did. And I'll tell you what, we had so many complaints about it.
No!
It was an absolute disaster, yeah. So I had to go back to the normal, standard, posh voice again.
Scotland last weekend, and all the announcements are quite rightly in a Scottish accent, you know, your next destination is. But then when you go to the loo, they haven't managed to change the very plummy BBC English voice telling you to the door is now locked. So you've got to, if you're going to do it, you've got to do it properly.
I just remember my friend on their sat-nav changing the voice, and you could have it sort of... husky, I was just thinking about husky woman voice or whatever voice, and he had his sat-nav constantly on husky woman. It wasn't Philip, it was somebody else. Kev, your story?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of really good ones I'm going in about. I want to talk, first of all, if I may, about the return of vinyl, if that's OK. Because I think that's really quite interesting. So HMV, that fabulous store in Oxford Street, it just regenerated itself.
Music store.
Yeah, it started in 1920-something, about 1921, and Sir Elgar opened it, you know, with a piece of music, and it's gone from strength to strength. Then it lost everything, back to its massive strength now. I don't know whether because HMV stands for His Master's Voice, and I think we need to really sort of consider, can we actually say that now? We perhaps need to rename that.
If everybody didn't know, they could have thought it was Her Master's Voice.
It could be.
If it was her or him that not Masters.
Yeah, and you can't use the word master either. You must drop the word master. But anyway, vinyl's returned, and I don't get this. I don't get this because I was thrilled when vinyl stopped, because every one of my vinyl records was scratched, right? Well, every time I played it, I couldn't go beyond track 3. And the biggest mistake I made was that I was at hospital waiting for the birth of my daughter a good few years back, and it was a hot day, and I'd bought a couple of LPs, and I put them on the back seat on a hot day, along with my sandwiches. My sandwich were totally inedible, and the LPs had actually curled up, which we then used as sort of little vases to put sweets in and things like that. I don't get it. I don't get the return of vinyl. I can't see the benefit of it. I'm hoping somebody's going to tell me, because I love the idea of being able to get my phone, bang it onto whatever sound system I've got at home, and I don't have to go and lift things.
You've got to up your hipster cred.
Is it not for DJs so they can do more of the...
Yeah, but it's a mixture. But the other thing is cassettes are coming back. So I actually have a friend who DJs off cassettes. Admittedly, in Berlin, he's too cool for school, but he's a Brit who goes around...
How can you do that? How can you
I'd actually know, but he kind of sort of has two machines...
Swirling it either way. Yeah, and making
it noise not credentials up.
Yeah, you need to get down to those discos. I'm going to do something completely different, because the word that was key in this story, Saturday's Times here, and it's ditch. Unrealistic pledge to ban petrol cars by 2030. Unrealistic. People know you're on a path to being, greener, more environmentally friendly, but it is the lunacy of the date 2030. Finger in the air. You followed the eco-zealots who've demanded more and more and more, but it is not realistic. Combination of the cost, combination of the infrastructure, combination of people, just not being able to, as I said, afford all the infrastructure of electric cars. So 2030 is the wrong time.
Matthew, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we do transition. I think that you need to be sensible about it, and absolute targets that, where the target becomes the issue rather than why you're doing it. I think
this isn't going to happen, is it?
And it's not going to happen. The worst thing about targets is don't set targets that aren't going to be achieved, isn't it?
But do you think there's an element of a government waiting for another government to come along to make the inevitable announcement?
I suspect that they may be trying to keep the sort of eco wing, the Lord Goldsmith, as Zach Goldsmith, wing of the Tory party, happy by keeping it in place, knowing they're not going to have to implement it?
I mean, you need 300,000 public charging points.
Yeah, charging points is a huge...
And we're only up to 37,000.
Yeah.
So what meant is it's just not going to happen.
I was at a service station last week, right, and I parked up for a little while, and there was one particular band of charging units for one particular vehicle. You know, the one I'm referring to begins with T and ends with Esther. And there are others available, of course. Every one of those units was full, right? They were all being charged up, and there were 3 cars waiting to get in when the others had pulled out. So for me, I wouldn't trust it yet. I really wouldn't.
And the cost runs into the whole thing now for the cost for motorists. Everybody thinks if it moves, let's tax it.
Absolutely.
Particularly if you've got a car, and whether that's parking permits, whether that's a clean air zone, and this sort of, again, in the Time State Councils raises permit prices to force cars off the road. And this is just not, I don't believe, what the public wants.
I think, look, so the council in question is, I'm 1 street away from it, so...
Luckily for you,
absolutely.
so I know where you'll be parking.
But I think there's a big issue for the left and for the environmental campaign, you know, who perfectly sensible goals, but again, you've got to bring people with you, and you've got to do it in a sensible way that doesn't put people off. And what I think the worst possible thing is if you have a backlash and we decide to abandon the journey. You've got to take that route in a sensible way.
And that's why I said the key word was unrealistic.
Absolutely.
Why, Matthew, do you think that the driver lobby seems to be so weak politically? Because there's so many people who drive, far more that use the trains or anything like that.
Or we haven't mentioned the C word, cyclists.
Yeah.
I wondered where you were going with the C word.
Why, it's always been a mystery to me why politically that lobby seems to be so weak.
Absolutely, and actually, it's not just the drivers' lobby. And there's a big issue at the moment about buses and about bus users because bus lanes are being taken for cycle lanes. You know, I actually spoke at a conference in Canada full of left-wing politicians from around the world, and I said, "Hang on, I get the bus across Westminster Bridge. You guys, your place of work, where there used to be a bus lane, and now there's a cycle lane. And so, you know, the low-income cleaners who are going to go and clean the building are stuck on the bus in traffic, whilst whizzing past a permanent secretary on their Brompton bikes, having just got off the train.
Well, you do take your life in your hands now if you try and get off at a bus stop
because
with everyone whizzing either way.
So I think you're right. I think that particularly the cycle lobby. I'm pro-cycling, but I'm pro-cycling alongside a mix, and it's about common sense. And if the left loses sight of common sense, that's when it loses voters' trust.
Your story, Kevin, there about your AI doctor.
Yeah, well, I've mentioned, you know, National Health and doctors before, you know, and getting through to my medical appointments navigator is really quite interesting to get an appointment of any form. But anyway, all is saved because thankfully in America there's a new system called ChatGPT. And all you've got to do basically is go online and you will get all the solutions you need to your medical problems. And what actually happened was that there was a panel of the 196 questions were posed by patients to doctors, 3 doctors, and also to the ChatGPT. And the responses came through, and 79% of the responses were preferred by the ChatGPT rather than the actual doctor itself. Are there worries within that? Of course there are. You know, there's going to be issues. But do we get to a stage in this country where, at the end of the day, the only way we're going to get any form of advice when it comes to a medical issue is by going online? We're close to that now.
What did the chatbot get right? Was it more pleasant? Was it more caring?
It does. Oh, that's a great point. It does. I mean, it actually says, and it's a great point, Esther, is that one of the issues that they say is that the GPs aren't kind enough. So, you know, if you manage to get an appointment with a GP, that's wonderful. Don't expect the GP to stroke you gently and make sure that your hair's in place and everything's fine.
It's not Dr. Finlay anymore,
not going to happen. But this ChatGPT, you're looking puzzled, Philip, but this is what's happening. This is what this ChatGPT, it will actually not only say to you, given the symptoms that you are now presenting, I would suggest that this is the problem, and thank you so much.
I was thinking, can you get a chat husband, a chat box husband?
The reason I was looking, I was thinking that it was actually better because you didn't have to go through the receptionist first.
Oh,
That's
no,
what I-
medical
I think
reception.
that's
No,
what
it's a
I thought.
navigator.
I mean, I think there's a serious point here, which is that this should provide a wake-up call to GPs. You know, we're always reading stories about how people are going to lose their jobs because of AI.
Yeah.
GPs have to realise that if they don't want to see a patient in person, I spill actually a lasagna and burnt myself, and it's never been seen by a GP. I've still 3 years later because it's all you send them a photo on WhatsApp now.
And I thought
They need to
maybe
learn.
the GP work was going to go abroad if you're on, behind a computer. It could be anywhere if you're on a phone anywhere. But we didn't necessarily think it was going to go to a robot or a chatbot.
No, and if they don't provide a better service than the robot, then that's going to be then people are going to start questioning why we're paying GPs what we're paying them.
I think we're at the stage now, Matt, honestly.
Now, just quickly, Kevin, I was interested particularly what you thought about this. Page 11 of the Daily Star, women sizzle the sausages is the... You've got a filthy mind, haven't you?
I never said a word.
It's about barbecuing.
I never said a word.
It's about barbecuing.
The accusations.
Blimey,
I'm going to speak to my lawyer.
Apparently, women are now in charge of the
Sizzling
barbecue.
sausages.
And the stereotype of a man at the grill is a thing of the past. Ladies reckon they are better than blokes at the summer cooking staple, with almost half saying they're better at cooking on coals than men. 3/4 of women said that the stereotype of man in the barbecue is outdated and sexist. So what do you think? Are women better at barbecuing than men? Kevin, what's your experience?
I couldn't possibly comment on that. I mean, for goodness sake. No, I think, it is, in my view, the whole barbecue thing is it's always been a guy thing. It's a beer in one hand, a stupid apron, right? And, and you're turning the sausages over. That's what it is.
Men burn
I'm going to support you. I think, thank goodness, it's about the only time men want to do a bit of cooking. So actually, I don't want to sizzle sausages on the barbecue. I'm going to leave that to you, Phil.
The bit that's putting me off women sizzling the sausages in here is apparently that they're increasingly ditching meat, adding plant-based burgers to the grills.
This is all part of your health, your new health kick, Phil.
No.
You've just committed to in the last 30 minutes. I don't mind which gender sizzles them, as long as they don't burn them. Because as somebody who doesn't have a garden, so is a barbecue guest, when you get there and you find that either undercooked or they're overcooked, it can be a complete nightmare.
I like them being overcooked.
He likes.
But I'd rather them with
he likes.
So bad for you, Philip.
Very well cooked.
So bad. Oh my
Yes, it is
goodness!
the carpet,
No, it's
but no,
really
he loves
bad for
them.
you.
Oh, I like my food
Carcinogenic.
overcooked.
No, you mustn't do that. Honestly.
Cremated, really, to be
Oh
honest.
no, Philip. No, you're going down the wrong avenue.
I'll tell you what, I'm getting a right pasting today.
Well, deservedly.
It's too much.
Alexa will release me now. Blooming Neck will be able to. Alexa will be able to understand Blooming Neck now, though. That's one good thing.
Matthew, Kevin, thank you so much indeed, and we'll see you both again very shortly.
Pleasure.
Anyway, coming up with local elections taking place on Thursday across much of the country, voters will now be required to present their ID. But is this infringement on democratic rights? We'll be speaking to Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle about this.
And if you've got to pop out, then put your radio on, tune it into GB News so you don't miss anything.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Oh, I tell you, there's lots of people been writing in about you, Phil, and views on obesity.
Go on.
OK, Peter says, I can't understand why Esther thinks Phil is fat. He looks OK to me, just healthy. The images of people you used in the article were definitely obese, though.
Thank you, Peter.
You're just healthy.
Ellen's my favourite. Ellen, thank you so much. Poor Phil, bless him, she says. I think he's gorgeous and not fat at all. I love them both on their programme. They have such a lovely rapport and sense of humour, and Esther always looks fabulous. Thanks for the show. Well, don't worry about Esther. I'll be moving on to you, Ellen, if you think I'm gorgeous, because she never tells me I'm gorgeous. So
he'll be cutting that out and framing it and putting it on the wall.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Stan says the UK has so many fat people, they are ridiculous and should be fined. Blummin' heck, Stan. Fine them and make them pay for visits to the doctors. And Esther says, Elaine says, Esther, I wonder whether the out-of-control weight gain for lots and lots of people, apart from maybe not doing enough exercising, could be down to genetically modified foods, which might be changing inside something in us, or the way we break food down could be onto something there.
Just quickly, lots of views on the theme tune still coming through. Stuart, I'm not... Stuart, you started off so well here. All Creatures Great and Small, the Rockford Files, I thought they were good. Then Bagpuss. Where did Bagpuss come from, Stuart? But I'm with you with All Creatures Great and Small and the Rockford Files.
Anyway, local elections next week will mark the first mass rollout of voter ID in the UK outside of Northern Ireland.
The aim is to crack down on electoral fraud. However, critics believe this will only lead to fewer people voting, with the elderly, the young and the poor the most likely to be disadvantaged.
Joining us now to discuss these new measures is Lloyd Russell Moyle, the Labour MP for Brighton Kemp Town. Hiya, good morning. So, what have you got against people taking ID down when they vote?
Well, we don't have a national ID in this country. We don't have requirements for ID. And the fact that you can still vote by post, bearing in mind post is where we do have actual electoral fraud. There's almost no electoral fraud by people turning up to the polling stations claiming they're someone else. But there is a fair amount of electoral fraud with postal votes where you don't need voter ID at all to access them. So it was a solution that was looking for a problem, and the problem was not solved by this solution. It will disadvantage some people that don't have a voter ID. And the voter ID the government is offering, if you apply for it, bearing in mind you have to remember then to apply for it and go through a whole rigmarole there, is a convoluted A4 piece of paper that is easily lost. And I don't know about you, but I know when my family have got to go on holiday, we end up running around the house for about an hour and a half trying to find where we put all of our passports. And the problem is, for people who are slightly unmotivated to vote, that hour and a half, they'll think, I'm not bothering, I just won't go and vote. And that's the problem, because we know that some people are slightly apathetic anyway. us three will be out there anyway, won't we? All of us, because whatever side you're on, we care about politics. But we just know a lot of other people are already on the line, and this might just push them over. And when they introduced it in Northern Ireland, and that was fair enough because that was based on evidence of needing to do it. First of all, ID was provided in a card form, so you could put it in your wallet, so you didn't lose it. And secondly, it did take 10 years for voting to return back to what it was previously in Northern Ireland. So we do know it has a dip and a problem. And the problem is also how it has been implemented in this country. So I am worried about it, and I think that it has been rushed.
Of course, Lloyd, on the other side of the equation, this was actually a recommendation by the Electoral Commission, who said a number of years ago that this was an actual and perceived weakness in our voting system. So, I mean, isn't it right that the government takes the advice of the Electoral Commission on how to restore confidence in the voting system when an independent body like them suggests something?
Well, there is very little evidence, if not no evidence, that there is problems with people voting without a voter ID card. And whilst the Commission advises, they advise lots of things that the government doesn't take on. The government and politics decides. And I think we made the wrong decision. And even if we had wanted some form of voter ID, we then need to implement it correctly. And the Electoral Commission and returning officers have been very clear that they are deeply worried about how this has been implemented. So you can't take one part of the advice and then not take the other part of the advice, which is about how to roll it out and how to make sure it happens correctly. And what we have seen is the access to free voter ID not very accessible and the choices of ID not very clear. So, for example, an old age person's bus pass is accepted, but a young person's bus pass is not accepted. They both will have applied using the same form of evidence. The same with rail cards. Old person, yes. Young person, no. And so some of that just
Lloyd,
doesn't seem...
I've got to get in here, Lloyd. If you want to pick something up from the post office, say something has been delivered, they'll ask for sort of photo ID for that. It's something that's common occurrence now. Aren't we just behind the curve, or you're behind on the times?
Well, the post office actually doesn't require photo ID, but it does require some form of evidence if you are picking...
I just Googled it and it said photo ID.
On behalf of someone else. But the argument there is that we should then introduce a national ID card where everyone can have an ID in their wallet. Now, I was originally opposed to that, as were many Liberal and Conservatives, and it was dropped in the coalition. But actually, I think now our data is held on the internet in so many places. Data understanding has changed dramatically in 10 years. And if we were to come forward with a proposal that you had an ID card that you could put in your wallet and everyone was given it for free, again, I think it would change the discussions and arguments. But you can't put the horse before you put the cart before the horse, and that's what we've done here. We've introduced ID regulations without having a national free ID card.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle, Labour MP for Brighton Kemp Town, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for sharing your views on voter ID, which people voting this week will need. And we'd love to hear your views about that, whether you think it's a good idea or, like Lloyd, you think it's a bad idea. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. There's still lots to come on Saturday morning with Esther and Phil, but first, here's the news headlines with Tatiana.
Phil, thank you very much and good morning. It's 11:32. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The deadline for British nationals to reach the evacuation airfield in Sudan has now passed. It comes as final evacuation flights out of the war-torn country will take place later today. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden will chair a COBRA meeting this afternoon to discuss the security situation in Khartoum in advance of the final flight taking off at 6 p.m. UK time. So far, British forces have rescued more than 1,500 people, but hundreds have been killed and tens of thousands have fled for their lives in a power struggle between the army and the paramilitary in Sudan. Great Ormond Street Hospital has been granted exemptions to keep nurses working during upcoming strike action. The Children's Hospital expressed concerns about staffing as Royal College of Nursing staff prepare to walk out. RCN members will go on strike from 8 p.m. tomorrow until Monday evening. Health workers belonging to the GMB union yesterday accepted a 5% pay offer from the government. Union officials will now vote to accept the offer at a meeting of the NHS Staff Council next week. Labour is promising to invest in more teachers who are specialists in their subjects if they win the next general election. It comes as a Labour analysis of government figures suggests that there are gaps in expert teaching provisions in state schools across England. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says schools are scrambling to fill roles, meaning there aren't high standards for all children. And 3 new photographs of the King and the Queen consort have been released ahead of next week's coronation. The images were taken in the palace's blue drawing room last month. One shows the couple standing side by side in front of a portrait of King George V at his coronation in 1911. Another shows Charles and Camilla individually, with the Queen consort wearing the late Queen's pearl drop earrings. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks, Tatiana. Earlier this week, it was announced that the Royal College of Nursing would cancel their strike action on Tuesday after the High Court ruled it would be unlawful. However, they would continue to strike on Monday.
The strikes are ongoing amidst a pay dispute. The unions Unison and GMB have both accepted the latest pay offer of a 5% rise plus a one-off bonus, but the offer was rejected by Unite yesterday and previously by the RCN.
We're joined now by nurse Kelly Hopkins to share her thoughts. So, Kelly, will you be on strike, and why? Why wasn't the settlement good enough for you?
We'll be striking on Monday, yes. The settlement wasn't good enough, I think, because when you look at the pay deal that they offered, for the unqualified nurses, the healthcare assistants, the pay deal was really, really good and the lump sum's really good. But for qualified nurses, with the responsibility that we have and the education we have to go through to be a qualified nurse and the registration that we're on, you know, the responsibility that we have, It just isn't fair. It's not a fair pay deal. The lump sum that they offered looks really good on paper, but by the time you've paid your tax and national insurance out of it, the government's giving it with one hand and taking it away with the other.
But I suppose, Kelly, all the unions have accepted the pay offer. The Royal College of Nursing leadership recommended accepting it, and it was narrowly rejected by the members. So it can't be that bad an offer, can it, given that level of support for it?
Well, I think when you look at Unison have a lot of unqualified nurses in their union. The Royal College of Nursing speaks for the voice of nurses. And if you could see on a daily basis what nurses are putting up with and what poor patients are having to put up with as well, it's actually disgusting. I came into nursing to care for people, to help them in their hour of need, and it's heartbreaking. It's actually heartbreaking. I've been a nurse for 28 years and I've never experienced working conditions like it.
Kelly, you say you came in to help people and care for people, and I absolutely, agree that that is the truth, and I think you're an intensive care nurse. But front page here of the Times, the NHS strike poses a great threat to Great Ormond Street. So these are sick children here, and what by going on strike you're doing is putting those children's lives at risk there, those sick, poor children. And we've got now delay upon delay of people on waiting lists who need your help and support. Wasn't there another way to sort out your agreement rather than hurting most those patients?
I don't agree with that. If you see what those patients are having to come into on a daily basis, that's hurting them. It's not safe. The staffing levels on wards are not safe. So you thought are putting those children's lives at risk on a daily basis anyway, because there's not enough staff to look after these sick patients. I feel that the government need to listen. They need to listen to what nurses are saying. They need to come down and spend a day in an A&E. I was working on a back corridor the other Saturday, having to nurse really ill patients on a corridor. It's not acceptable. They're not listening. They're not prepared to sit down and listen to why we're striking. We're striking because we can't recruit. We cannot attract new talent into the profession. That's why we've got a shortage of nurses. If they paid us well, we could attract new talent into the profession, and then we wouldn't need agency nurses. They spend billions and billions of pounds, millions of pounds on agency.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and I hope we can all agree that we hope that the strike action ends sooner rather than later. But thank you for taking the time to share your views with us this morning.
Now you're watching Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Still to come, we'll be back with all the latest sports and showbiz from Hayley and Aidan, so don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:42.
Yeah, lots of views coming in about all sorts of things. Still, theme tunes are still coming through. But I thought I'd pick on the views about local MPs. We had Michael Crick on earlier talking about we shouldn't be...
And Jackie Weaver.
We did. We had Jackie Weaver too.
She's kicked him out.
Debating about whether or not it's better to have MPs who are local or not. Mary says, I agree with Michael Crick, the brightest and the best every time. John says local representation means more NIMBYism. Terry says, I think this is an interesting point. If localism for MPs is not important, then why have constituency-based elections for MPs? Maybe a PR list system would give what Haig and Crick what they want. I think that's an interesting point, isn't it?
Mm. Was it Burke who said it's not like the MP for Bristol we want? We want MPs, we want members of Parliament to come in as a parliamentary group to change policy, and that's where the scrutiny comes from. But I think it is important that you know your local area so you can champion it and say, why haven't we got this for the North West? Anyway, lots of you coming in with lots of different comments there. But look, next week...
Can I just say this before we go any further? We were talking about who should be the next BBC chairman.
Yeah.
Peter says, in the woke world, no doubt it will have to be a black woman. I understand Diane Abbott is free. That's Peter's view.
Oh, it brought a smile to your face. Yeah. But with 1 week to go until King Charles's coronation, there's lots going on in the royal household, from invites to, and royal snubs. So we're joined now by royal commentator Judita De Silva to give us the latest. Now, Judita, I wanted to talk about this and get your view on it, because it's interesting, isn't it, that Meghan Markle has now signed up with a new talent agency. And I'm just wondering, is that to start stealing the headlines from the coronation next week? Because it's curious timing that she should have gone out there looking for more PR.
The announcement of it is very conspicuous timing with just a week to the coronation. But I will say, I give credit to Meghan Markle for making this choice. Because I cannot tell you how many times I have been discussing the royals, I've been corresponding on it, and I keep saying, I don't know who is managing Harry and Meghan, because clearly they are out of their depth and it feels like amateur hour. There are so many choices that someone with a basic knowledge of PR on the level that they are at would say, don't do that. And so signing with WME is a great thing, because she's now got a powerhouse behind the Harry and Meghan brand and Archwell, their foundation. And most importantly, there's a certain man on the team called Ari Emanuel. He's the CEO of Endeavour, talent manager. And he deals with a kind of client list that includes Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Serena Williams. But to put it in perspective for those who don't know him, if you think back to before his fall from grace, Max Clifford, at the height of his abilities, he was exceptional at his job. Any celebrity in trouble wanted him because he was a fixer, he was a strategist, and he had a black book that political campaign managers would be envious of. Ari Emanuel is like Max Clifford on steroids. You have him in your camp, you sleep easier at night. And from the blunders, the PR catastrophes that Harry and Meghan have had to deal with thus far, had they had Ari Emanuel with them from the beginning, the narrative of Harry and Meghan's exodus from royal duties might have been different.
So, Judita, you're saying that they've crashed around and not knowing what they've done, rather than what we've seen is that she has known what she's doing and they've been stealing the limelight.
I think it's with, how do I explain? They're like box office gold. Whatever they do makes a 24-hour news cycle. They've got to manage how they use that platform, which they cannot escape. Meghan had an awareness of fame on a very different level prior to being in a relationship with Harry, and what has passed since then. It's not so much her wanting to steal headlines. She's going to get them, but what kind needs to be managed? That's why WME will help. I think she's damned if she does, damned if she doesn't, and she has to accept that. And the level that you're operating at now, you cannot afford to be led by emotion. You've got to be led by wisdom and solid advice.
But Harry must have known what he was doing, and it seemed to be unfortunate timing when he came through with the court case and delivered his 31-page submission there, and what he put in there, all what would be seen breaches of confidentiality with his family. So what's he doing? He must know these things, and he's had royal connections. He's had this all his life. He shouldn't be making those faux pas.
Yes, I do agree with you to a point, because there's two levels to what I believe Harry is doing. One is he's going scorched earth because he is so deeply wounded. Because remember, before we all analyze things, they're a family. There is love there. There is hurt there. There are broken hearts there. And those are feelings. And like I said before, Harry and Meghan tend to lead with emotion instead of wisdom, which is blown up in their face. The timing of this is not good. But again, they haven't had the best people advising them prior to this time. And you know how the saying goes, I think some pundits have used it, that if a child doesn't feel the warmth of the village, they will burn the village to the ground to feel the warmth of the flames. Harry's doing that. And I think it comes from someone who's deeply hurt, deeply broken, and desperately trying to find a way to assert himself as an independent being while still getting the attention of a family that he is estranged from.
I also thought it was interesting that Kate is the most popular royal, and I wondered whether Meghan was getting extra PR so that she could compete, because they always seem to have a bit of competition going there. She was actually competing with Kate for the top spot.
I think when they were still in England, that definitely was a subliminal competition between the two of them. Beautiful to capture on camera, pleasant to be around. There was definitely a competition. Now, Meghan's playing field is America, Kate's is Britain. And I believe that why Kate has kind of come ahead of the pack is because she has absorbed and imbibed traits that British people like to see in royals, where she's pious, she's dutiful, she brings no drama, she's not problematic. When you see her, when you talk to her, she's personable. British people resonate more with someone who shows their humanity and their empathy and they feel they can connect with, as opposed to someone who just presents with all the trappings of being royal. And when you look at that poll of popularity, after William, Kate, and the grandchildren, it's Princess Anne. There's something about the bloodline in that family that makes formidable women, from the Queen Mother to Queen Elizabeth to Margaret to Princess Anne, and we've even seen it in Little Princess Charlotte. They know how to focus on duty above all else. And if the same people were polled, I believe that they would prefer a Queen Anne to a King Charles.
Oh, Judita, talking of formidable women, you're one of them. Thank you for joining us today and speak to you soon. Thank you.
She's brilliant, isn't she, Judita?
Did you like that?
Yeah,
yes,
brilliant.
The country would have maybe preferred a Queen Anne.
Well, controversial one. Anyway, let's now take a look at the biggest stories from the world of sport and showbiz with the most glamorous couple of sport and showbiz people, Hayley and Aidan. Thank you both.
Usually it's not so wonderful, but
well, I know, but you've gone up in. You've been promoted this week.
Oh, good. Okay.
It's nearly the end of the football season. You've been promoted. But anyway, the most exciting thing in sport at the moment, Aidan, snooker.
Well, I wouldn't say it's the most exciting. I'd say it was, in fact, on the contrary, there was a game between Mark Selby and who's the other guy? Let me just check his name. He wasn't.
You just don't like. He just doesn't like snooker. That's why.
I know what it was. There was slow play yesterday, and it was called off. The game was called off at 6 o'clock yesterday because there'd been so much slow play. They didn't have time to complete the allotted further 3 frames. The crowd were a bit annoyed about it, because they felt they should have got their money's worth at the Crucible. And this is a semi-final. It's meant to be like the business end of the competition. I feel that this competition has had a little bit more spotlight on it just because of the Just Stop Oil protest the week before last. But they were pulled off at 6 o'clock and they're resuming this morning. They're underway. So Stephen Hendry described it as a dark cloud over Sheffield, which I think was a little bit melodramatic. He knows what it's like. He's been in tactical battles before, and it's gone on for a long time. But there's another story in the other semi-final. Guy Jarvi, who's the number 80, world number 80 in the semi-final. He could become the youngest winner of the world title ever since Stephen Hendry, who was 21 years and 180 days.
I think he might win, don't you?
Yeah, he's 14-10 up at the moment. He's up against a guy called Luca Bretzel from
All sounding very exciting to me, that snooker.
Well, I was going to
say... Not just Stop the Oil there, who go on and cause mayhem.
Yeah, Bretzel knocked out O'Sullivan in the last round, so he's no mug, and he's launched a bit of a comeback in the last few hours.
Well, snooker might send lots of people to sleep, which is a good link to pyjamas, isn't it, Hayley?
Absolutely. So apparently there's been a number of stars that have been spotted in their pyjamas going to the airport and on the plane. A girl from Game of Thrones was most recently spotted. Now, for me, I think there's that line. Should you really turn up to the airport in your pyjamas? Not me, because I want to get upgraded to first class. So I'm going to look my best on that occasion.
Well, if you take for first class, though, you can do whatever you want.
But I think if you are going to go and put your pyjamas on, get on the plane and then change into your pyjamas and then change before you get off. Phil, why are you looking like that?
Well, it's a bit tight, isn't it, for getting changed on the plane?
Yeah, I can't even fit in the toilet, let alone...
Exactly.
How about having your pyjamas under your clothes and then take your outer...
Esther. She's thought about this, hasn't she?
And take your outer garments off. But you say pyjamas, hair rollers, all of these things people are now doing that you would have done in the privacy of your own home. Now it's sort of fashionable to go out...
But have everyone turning up to Gatwick Airport in pyjamas. It's going to look completely random, isn't it?
Those checked ones.
Things have changed, though. 5 years ago.
Well, you're going to turn up in your pyjamas.
No, 5 years ago I went to the Co-op in my QPR dressing gown and my slippers.
What?
And it was 5 years ago, but it was...
That's so embarrassing.
But they wouldn't serve me. They wouldn't serve me.
I'm not surprised.
Well, it was only 2 minutes from my door.
So you mean...
I reckon if I went in now, it would be socially acceptable.
So hang on, Aidan. You just sort of rolled out of bed, thought, I need a pint of milk, put your gown on and just sloped on down in your slippers.
I had underpants on, excuse me. But yeah,
didn't even mention the
Just to confirm.
It was a
We
warm
didn't
day.
even care
It was a
about
warm
that.
day. They refused to serve me, and that was disappointing. I haven't shopped at that particular car again. There's other ones around.
I'm sure they're gutted.
I'm more Waitrose now.
Your pint of milk, I tell you that.
Well, you think that's now socially acceptable to go
Well,
to
from
the
what Hayley
supermarket?
says, yeah, I think.
I don't think so.
I think
Have some respect to the
Haven't we
nation.
had
Have
this
some respect to Bromley.
Haven't we had this before with people going and dropping their kids off, though, in
To school
their
wearing-
sort of,
No.
yes, in their pyjamas and
It's like going to the theatre in your football shirt. It's not okay.
I can't work out what's worse, the dressing gown or the QPR dressing gown. I'm not sure.
Well, there's only one dressing gown.
Do you think Tom Cruise would have a dressing gown and pyjamas?
No,
Do you think
because he has
he'd
respect.
always be suited and...
He always looks immaculate, and I'm delighted that the lineup for the concert has been revealed, and also Tom Cruise and Winnie the Pooh, may I add, have been included in the concert lineup, which will happen on the 7th of May. Now, I love the connection with Tom Cruise and the royal family, because my favourite was when he was at the Top Gun premiere and he was helping Kate on the stairs, such a gentleman. And I know he was there talking to Prince William about
was
flying.
sort of knocked sideways, wasn't he?
But they do have that flying connection. Oh, there it is. That's my favourite photo.
Even if Kate is a few inches taller than Tom.
Yeah, she really... I'm not sure how tall she is, actually, but maybe she's got high heels on there. Yeah, he is quite small to be. I think he's about 5'10",
But it's
actually.
quite a long-running connection, isn't it, that Tom's got with the royal family?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's pictures of Kate with him at Wimbledon, and also he was pictured at Diana's funeral as well. And also, Tom Cruise recently, before the Queen died, he had tea with her in Windsor. So it's a really lovely connection that he does have. So I think it's a real special time.
Yeah.
What aren't you bothered? Do you not like either Tom or the royal family? What's going on?
No,
Feels in a bad mood
I'm
today.
I'm not a massive fan of Tom Cruise.
Oh, he does some cracking films. All those Mission Impossible. Oh, no, we like Tom.
You've still got an image
Tom
of me in my
Cruise.
dressing gown in your mind, haven't you?
He still hasn't got over the shop.
I'm not quite sure about his Scientology link,
Yeah,
but I think
exactly,
his
yeah.
films are fantastic.
He comes in. I think he uses the Scientology place down in Sussex near Gatwick Airport. 'Cause my friend worked at Gatwick Airport security and used to wave.
Were you out there with your autograph book?
Nah, not really. No. Well, no. I think he had an autograph.
He's
book.
still over Cheryl Baker's autograph.
What else is happening in the world of sport?
Well, Man United takeover is edging closer. We had the deadline last night, 10 o'clock. We had three bids in. Two of them are really the most serious one. We had the Qatari bid, Sheikh Jassim, £5 billion with an extra £1 billion to clear the debt, an extra £1 billion to spend on players, and an undertaking to improve the stadium and the training ground. That's the bid that the supporters will go with. James Radcliffe has submitted a bid which we don't know the monetary value of it, but it's 51% of the club roughly. The Glazers would retain 20, and the other 30 would carry on being traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So it keeps the Glazers involved. Not sure the fans would be happy about that. But I think deep down, if you're a fan of United, you're probably going to want the Qatar bid because they're going to spend more money, and it's only by spending money on players that they're going to catch Manchester City.
Well, if they get turned down for that, I'm hoping they might bid for Bradford City.
Yeah, you never know. You never know, Phil. Keep dreaming, right?
We could do with them.
Quick story, Hayley?
I want to talk about I'm a Celebrity because I've been watching it. I'm really getting into it, actually. I know people weren't too keen on having 2 a year, but it is actually quite addictive. And last night you saw Sean Ryder and Gillian McKeith get voted out. I have to say that both of them were the ones that snuck things in to the jungle because you're not allowed to take any luxury items in. So Gillian
What did they
McKeith...
take in?
Gillian McKeith was taking food in. She was taking in like miso soup and like healthy food. I would have taken in chocolate. I know you would have eaten.
I would have totally taken in Kit Kats or
Monster Munch,
chocolate.
little baby biscuits.
Carol Vorderman seems to have been taking in bikinis, rather racy bikinis.
Oh,
as
yes,
well.
her and Mylene Class last night looked hot in their bikinis, I have
That's
to
all
say.
we've got time for. Hayley, Aidan, thank you very much indeed. We will be back next Friday at 10 a.m. Thank you for watching. It's been absolutely a packed show. And next, we've got GB News Saturday with Martin Daubney, so don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a